The office was too quiet, except for the sound of his voice cutting through the air. My boss stood in front of everyone, pointing at me like I was nothing. Papers were scattered on the conference table, and I felt all eyes on me. My chest burned with shame. "Is this what you call work?" he shouted, waving the file I had spent nights preparing. "This is a joke. Absolute nonsense." I wanted to speak, to explain that I had followed his instructions word for word. But the way he glared at me, daring me to talk back, froze my tongue. I could feel my hands shaking under the table. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes, others hiding their smirks. No one dared to defend me. "Do you even understand why we hired you?" he pressed on. His voice was sharp, cruel. "You're wasting my time, wasting this company's money. Maybe you're just not cut out for this job." The words sank into me like stones. My throat tightened, but I held my tears back. Crying in front of him would only give him more power. Inside, anger fought with humiliation. I knew the work was good. I had stayed in the office till midnight, double-checking every detail. Yet here I was, being torn apart in front of the whole department. He slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing like a slap. "Fix this mess. And do it properly this time. Or maybe I'll find someone who can." The room stayed silent. No one moved, no one breathed. I forced myself to nod, though my heart screamed at the unfairness. As I gathered the papers with trembling fingers, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass wall, small, embarrassed, and powerless. Walking back to my desk felt like walking through fire. My ears buzzed with the memory of his words. Around me, people whispered, and I could almost hear their judgments. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. This was my job, my only source of survival. And in that moment, as I sat down and tried to steady my hands, I knew something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about a report. He wanted to break me, to make me feel small. But deep down, I never planned to end up in this office. Growing up, my dream was simple, to build a better life for my family. My mother raised me and my younger brother alone after my father passed away. She sold vegetables in the market and worked long hours just to keep food on the table. I studied late into the night, determined not to waste her sacrifices. When I finally graduated, the joy in her eyes was enough to keep me going. But a degree doesn't always guarantee opportunity. Finding this job felt like a lifeline. The company was one of the biggest in the city, and getting through the interview felt like a miracle. I promised myself I would work harder than anyone else, no matter the challenges. The salary wasn't much, but it was enough to pay rent, send money home, and cover my brother's school fees. Every morning when I got on the crowded bus to the office, I reminded myself that I wasn't just working for me, I was working for my family's future. But life in the office was not what I imagined. From the first day, I noticed how people acted around my boss. His name was Mr. Martins. He had the kind of presence that made people shrink the moment he entered the room. Tall, always in sharp suits, his voice carried like a whip. On the surface, he looked confident, but I soon learned that his confidence was built on tearing others down. He hated being questioned. He hated seeing anyone else shine. If you made a mistake, he wouldn't correct you quietly. He would wait until the whole department was gathered before exposing it. Some people learned to laugh at his cruel jokes just to survive. Others stayed silent, avoiding his attention. I never wanted to be the target, but somehow, I always seemed to be. At first, I thought maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe this was just how corporate life worked. But then I noticed the small thing. He would dismiss my ideas in meetings, only to present them later as his own. He would assign me extra work at the last minute, knowing I couldn't say no. He would compare me to others, as if I was never good enough, no matter how hard I tried. Still, I pushed through. I woke up early, stayed late, and poured myself into every task. My dream was bigger than his insults. I wanted to save enough to help my mother expand her small business, to send my brother to university without worrying about fees, and maybe one day, to build a home where my family could finally breathe easy. Some evenings, when the office lights dimmed and everyone else had gone home, I would sit at my desk and whisper promises to myself. Don't give up. This is just the beginning. I imagined a future where I could walk into a place of work without fear, where my value wasn't questioned at every step. But Mr. Martins seemed determined to crush that hope. He had favorites in the office, people who laughed at his jokes, who nodded at his every word. They climbed quickly, while people like me, who stayed quiet and focused, were left behind. I didn't have the luxury of quitting. Every paycheck mattered, so I endured. Deep down, I knew his cruelty didn't come from strength. It came from insecurity. He wanted control, and the only way he knew how to get it was by making others feel small. But knowing that didn't make it easier to face him every day. The office became a battlefield, with invisible lines drawn. I walked carefully, trying not to step on the wrong side. But no matter how careful I was, it seemed like he always had his eyes on me, waiting, testing, looking for another chance to humiliate me. And though I tried to keep my head down, A part of me wondered how long I could survive in his shadow. Because one truth was clear. Mr. Martins wasn't just a bad boss. He was a storm. And if I was, the project had taken me weeks to prepare. Every night I stayed back in the office long after everyone else had left, poring over research, checking numbers, and building a presentation that could impress even the most difficult executive. It wasn't just another task for me. It was a chance to finally prove myself, to show that I was more than the quiet girl in the corner who followed orders. When the day of the big meeting came, I was nervous but ready. I had printed copies of my report, checked the slides 100 times, and even practiced my speech in front of the bathroom mirror that morning. I wanted everything to be perfect. The conference room filled with important people, the senior managers, department heads, and even a few members of the executive board. The air was thick with seriousness. My heart raced as I waited for Mr. Martins to call my name. After all, he had told me just yesterday, be prepared. You'll present your findings tomorrow. Don't embarrass me. But when the time came, he didn't call me. He stood up himself, straightened his tie, and walked to the front of the room with my file in his hand. I froze in my seat. He was holding my work. Ladies and gentlemen, he began smoothly, his voice carrying with confidence. I want to show you the strategy I've been working on for the past few weeks. I blinked, thinking I misheard him. But as he clicked through the slides I had built line by line, I realized what was happening. He was presenting my work as if it belonged to him. Every idea, every detail, every long night I had sacrificed was now his glory. The executives nodded along, impressed. Some even took notes. My stomach twisted in pain. I wanted to shout, to stand up and tell them the truth. But my voice felt trapped in my throat. If I spoke out now, he would call it disrespect. He would twist the story, and I would be the one punished. At the end of his presentation, the room filled with applause. One of the directors leaned forward, smiling. Excellent work, Martins. This is exactly the kind of innovation we need. I watched him smile, proud and satisfied, as if he had really done it all. Then he turned, his eyes briefly meeting mine across the table. In that look, I saw it. He knew what he had done, and he was daring me to challenge him. Of course, he added casually. My team helped with some of the groundwork, but the main ideas came from me. I take full responsibility for this proposal. The words cut deeper than any insult. Not only had he stolen my work, but he had erased me completely, reducing my endless effort to groundwork. Around the table, some of my colleagues glanced at me, pity in their eyes. Others looked away, not wanting to get involved. When the meeting ended, people gathered around him, congratulating him on his brilliance. I stayed in my chair, too stunned to move. My hands shook as I packed my thing. No one said a word to me. It was as if I had become invisible. Back at my desk, the weight of it crashed down on me. I had given everything, and still, I was nothing in his eyes. My chest ached, my throat burned, and before I knew it, silent tears blurred my vision. I quickly wiped them away, ashamed to be crying at work. That day, something broke inside me. It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the injustice. The realization that no matter how hard I worked, he would always find a way to keep me down. For the first time, I wondered if my dreams of rising in this company were foolish. But another part of me, small but fierce, whispered that this couldn't go on forever. Something had to change, because if I let him win this time, he would keep stealing, keep humiliating me, until there was nothing left of me to fight with. After that meeting, the air in the office changed. It wasn't just that Mr. Martins had stolen my work. It was the way he carried himself afterward. He walked taller, his smile wider, like he had proved something to everyone. Every time I saw him chatting with executives in the hallway, laughing as though he belonged on a throne, it made my stomach twist. At first, I told myself to endure it, to focus on the next task. But he didn't stop there. A few days later, when a small error appeared in one of the reports, not even my section, he called me into his office. "You can't keep letting me down like this," he said, his voice calm but sharp. He tapped the paper with his pen. "This kind of mistake reflects badly on me. You understand that, don't you?" It wasn't even my fault. But I nodded, because what else could I do? If I argued, he would only find another way to punish me. The punishments began to grow subtle but cruel. Extra assignments piled onto my desk late in the evening, always urgent, always due by morning. Meetings where he asked me to speak, only to cut me off halfway with a mocking smile. "That's enough. Clearly, you don't have the answer." He didn't need to raise his voice anymore. His quiet dismissal was worse. Soon, the whispers started. At first, it was little things I overheard at the printer or in the break room. "She's not as smart as I thought. Maybe she got the job because of pity. She's always messing up." I never knew who started the gossip, but I knew who had planted the seed. Mr. Martins never had to say much. His attitude toward me gave permission for others to treat me as less. I found myself alone more often. Lunch breaks that used to be shared with colleagues turned into lonely moments at my desk, eating rice and beans from a plastic container while pretending to work. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Smiles faded quickly, replaced with polite silence. Some people avoided my eyes altogether, afraid that associating with me might make them the next target. The loneliness hurt more than the workload. I could handle long nights and difficult projects, but the feeling of being invisible, of being unwanted, ate away at me slowly. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I wasn't as capable as I thought. Maybe Mr. Martins was right. At night, when I got home to my small apartment, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted but my mind restless. Bills piled up on my desk, rent, electricity, my brother's school fees. I couldn't afford to quit. I couldn't even afford to take a long break. My salary wasn't much, but without it, everything at home would collapse. The thought of failing my family pressed on me heavier than anything Mr. Martins said. Sometimes my mother would call, her voice tired but warm, asking how work was. I always lied. "It's fine, Mama. I'm managing." How could I tell her the truth? She had sacrificed too much for me to reach this place. I couldn't let her know I was breaking. But in the middle of all that darkness, something small began to grow inside me. It started the day I caught one of my colleagues looking at me with guilt in her eyes. She had avoided me for weeks, but when we crossed paths by the elevator, she whispered, "I know it was your work he presented. Everyone knows." Her words lit a spark. People knew the truth, even if they stayed silent. I wasn't completely invisible. That night, I opened my old notebook, the one I used in school for writing ideas, and I started writing everything down. Every insult, every stolen credit, every unfair assignment. I listed dates, times, witnesses. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. Maybe it was just a way to let the anger out without screaming. But as the pages filled, I realized it was more than that. It was proof. I still woke up every morning with dread, still walked into the office with my shoulders heavy, but now I had something no one could take from me, a quiet record of the truth. And even though I felt weak most days, there were moments, tiny ones, when I caught my reflection and saw a different version of myself. Not just the girl he tried to humiliate, but someone holding on, someone refusing to disappear. I didn't have power, not yet. But deep inside, I began to believe that one day, all of this would matter. One day, his cruelty would be exposed. And when that day came, I would not stay silent. It happened on a Tuesday morning, a day that began like any other. I came in early, hoping to finish a report before the chaos of the day started. But before I could even sit down, Mr. Martins called me into the conference room. His tone was sharp, his expression already annoyed, as if he had been waiting for me to fail. The room was half full, a few colleagues sitting around, and at the far end of the table was someone I didn't recognize at first. She was young, dressed elegantly but simply, her posture calm and confident. Later, I would learn she was Amara, the CEO's daughter, recently returned from studying abroad. That morning, she was just another face in the room, one I barely noticed because of the storm already brewing. Mr. Martins threw a file on the table in front of me. "Care to explain this disaster?" he demanded. His voice rose with every word. "This is sloppy work. Incomplete, unprofessional. Do you want me to look like a fool in front of the executive?" I froze, scanning the papers. My heart sank. It wasn't my report. Pages had been switched out. Figures altered. The neat, careful work I had prepared had been replaced with something messy, rushed, full of errors. Someone had tampered with it, and I didn't need to guess who had the power to do that. "This is unacceptable," Mr. Martins barked, slamming his hand on the table. "I have been too patient with you. Maybe it's time we reconsider your position here." The sting of humiliation burned my eyes, but I swallowed hard, refusing to cry. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the silence heavy. And then, before I could respond, a calm voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me," Amara said, her tone sharp but measured. "Can I see that file?" The room shifted. People looked at her, then at Mr. Martin. He hesitated, but he handed her the file with a forced smile. "Of course, Amara. As you can see, this is the level of incompetence I've been dealing with." She didn't answer him right away. She flipped through the pages quickly, her sharp eyes catching details most would miss. Then she set the file down and looked directly at me. "Did you prepare this?" I opened my mouth, but fear held me back. If I said yes, he would bury me. If I said no, he would twist it. My silence stretched for a moment too long. "Yes, she did." Mr. Martins cut in smoothly. "I gave her clear instructions, but apparently, she doesn't have the skill for this level of work." Amara tilted her head, studying me. Then she turned back to the file. "That's interesting," she said slowly, "because I saw the draft of this report yesterday evening when I walked past her desk. The numbers were correct. The formatting was different. This," she tapped the messy pages, "isn't the same document." The room went still. My breath caught in my chest. She had seen my real work. Mr. Martins laughed lightly, but his voice cracked just enough to betray him. Well, perhaps she made last-minute changes that ruined the report. She often rushes. I've tried to guide her, but— No, Amara interrupted, her voice firm now. I don't think this is her mistake. I think someone deliberately swapped her work with this mess. Murmurs filled the room. My colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, Mr. Martins looked unsettled. Are you accusing me? He asked, his smile tight. Amara didn't flinch. I'm stating a fact. This company belongs to my father, and I won't watch people get humiliated for crimes they didn't commit. I want to see the files from the system log. IT can trace when and by whom these changes were made. Shall we? The color drained from his face. For years, he had hidden behind his authority, his voice, his arrogance. But in that moment, his mask slipped. His control was cracking. I don't think that's necessary, he stammered. I do, Amara said simply. And while we're at it, I'd like to review other recent projects. I've heard whispers of ideas being taken without credit. That stops today. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting. My colleagues looked at me, some with guilt, others with relief. Mr. Martin stood frozen, his confidence gone. For the first time since I had entered that office, I felt something shift in the air. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone had seen the truth. And not just anyone, the CEO's daughter. As the meeting ended, Amara turned to me and gave a small nod, a silent message. You're not invisible. I see you. And in that moment, I realized the storm that had once made me powerless was— The hours after that meeting felt unreal. For so long, I had been the one humiliated, ignored, and silenced. But now the balance had shifted. Whispers spread quickly through the office. Amara had ordered IT to pull system records. She wanted to know who had tampered with the files, and everyone already knew the answer, even before the proof came back. By the next day, the evidence was clear. The logs showed that Mr. Martins had accessed my folder late at night, just before the meeting. He had swapped the clean report for the faulty one. There was no denying it. I was called into the CEO's office, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. Amara was there, sitting beside her father, calm but firm. Mr. Martins was also present, but for once, he didn't look powerful. His shoulders slumped, sweat shining on his forehead. The CEO looked at me with kind but serious eyes. We reviewed the situation, he said slowly. It's clear to us that your work was not only correct but excellent. What happened was sabotage. And in this company, we do not tolerate sabotage. Mr. Martins tried to speak, but Amara cut him off. You've built your career on destroying others, she said, her voice steady. But it ends here. Hearing her say those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time, the truth was spoken aloud in front of the highest authority, and I was not the one being blamed. The CEO turned back to me. On behalf of this company, I want to apologize for what you've been through. It was undeserved. He paused, his tone softening. You have a future here if you want it. Tears stung my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from relief, from the feeling of finally being seen. All the long nights, the silent endurance, the humiliation, it hadn't been for nothing. Mr. Martins was dismissed within the week. There was no loud announcement, but his absence filled the office with a quiet sense of justice. The people who once avoided me now approached with awkward smiles, offering small words of kindness. Some even apologized, though I knew their silence before had been out of fear, not malice. Still, I didn't forget how it felt to sit alone, how it felt to be invisible. I promised myself I would never let anyone make me feel that small again. In the weeks that followed, I felt myself slowly healing. I no longer dreaded walking into the office. My shoulders felt lighter, my steps steadier. Amara checked in on me often, encouraging me to share my ideas openly. For the first time, my work was recognized, my name attached to my efforts. And when someone tried to speak over me in a meeting, Amara gave me the floor again. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Outside of work, the change was even more powerful. When I sent money home for my brother's school fees, I did it with pride, not with the bitter taste of exhaustion. When my mother called, I told her the truth, not the pain, but the victory. She cried softly on the phone, her voice filled with joy. You see, my daughter? Hardship doesn't last forever. She was right. The scars of those months would stay with me, but they no longer defined me. What defined me was that I had endured, and in the end, the truth had come out. I had been broken down, but I had not stayed broken. I had been silenced, but I had not lost my voice. And now, for the first time, I was free to speak, free to stand, free to dream again. One evening, weeks after everything had settled, I found myself standing by the office window as the sun set over the city. The glass reflected my face, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a woman weighed down by fear or shame. I saw someone who had survived, someone who had been tested and refused to disappear. Life wasn't suddenly perfect. The memories of those humiliations still lingered, the echoes of his voice sometimes slipping into my thoughts. But now they no longer had power over me. They were just reminders of where I had been and how far I had come. The office felt different now. I walked through the halls with steady steps, no longer hiding behind silence. My ideas were heard, my name was respected, and I knew it wasn't just because of Amara's intervention. It was because I had kept going, even when it hurt, even when it felt impossible. At home, when I spoke to my mother and brother, I could hear pride in their voices. That was worth more than any applause. I had carried their hopes on my shoulders, and though I had stumbled, I hadn't let them fall. As I packed up my things that evening, I looked once more at the desk where I had once sat trembling, fighting back tears. I smiled. That girl was still me, but she wasn't the whole of me. Now I was stronger, sharper, and braver. Stepping out into the cool night air, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." And I believed it. The future no longer frightened me. It was waiting for me, wide and open, and this time, I was ready to walk into it with my head held high.